I'm Rebecca.
And I'm Charlene. Welcome to Empowered, Life Lessons of Everyday Women.
Each episode, you're going to meet an amazing woman who has struggled through challenges both in her home life and work life and has become very successful. Meet Janet L. Janet has her PhD in communications. Her career has included teaching over 6,000 students at the college level, as well as several positions within Michigan State University. She is currently the Assistant Vice President of Community Relations at MSU. So grab a cup of coffee, get in a comfy chair, and let's talk to Janet. Welcome, Janet.
Well, hello.
We're so happy you could join us today. We're going to start right at the very beginning. If you had to talk to your 20-year-old self and give her a little piece of advice, what would that be?
Well, first of all, Rebecca and Charlene, thank you so much for having me on. This is just a terrific opportunity. I greatly appreciate it. My 20-year-old self, well, I have to start by saying, because I have thought about this, that I was very, very fortunate to have a lot of seasoned professionals around me while growing up, the youngest of 6 kids, as well as parents who definitely brought me into adult conversations. So I had that opportunity. So I think the advice that I would give myself is just keep in mind that every day is a new opportunity. Every day is a new opportunity to learn something about yourself, to learn something about others, to learn what you like, you don't like, to improve on things that you want to, and to think for the future.
I love that.
I do too.
I really love that. So I know that you had started your career as a sales rep, but then you decided to go back to university and get your PhD. What made you decide to do that?
Well, first of all, when I graduated college, I was really happy to have a full-time job, and I was very excited to be a sales rep working for a great company in the Indianapolis area. But what I soon realized is that it was not intrinsically motivating for me. Even though it was a great job, I had great colleagues, I had great clients. At the end of the day, I didn't feel like I was moving the needle on anything or making a difference in anyone's lives. And when I had reflected back on my years as being a college student, I remember very distinctly the moment that I realized I wanted to work at a university and be on a college campus and have a career in that, impacting people on a daily basis, but also being in a learning environment that would be rewarding for me personally.
So it's interesting that you said you had a great job. I mean, I think this is really kind of interesting. You had a great job, but it wasn't motivating to you and you didn't fulfill yourself. Just being able to take that or understanding or realizing that you had that kind of inspiration of understanding that what you were doing on a daily basis was not good for you. It's just kind of interesting to look at that because a lot of people, I think, and especially maybe our listeners, maybe in a job that they really don't like, but it's a good job, so they don't leave. They have that fear factor. So, yeah, well, thanks for sharing that.
Truly, I was scared. I was, let me see, how old was I at the time? I was early 20s, and I thought to myself, and I even said it to some of my friends that I had met in Indianapolis, oh, wow, well, a PhD program, because I also had to go and get my master's and then my PhD. And
Right.
like, that takes a long time. And, oh, I'll be 28 when it's done. And my friend looked at me and she goes, you'll be 28 when it's done in 5 years anyways. And I'm like, well, that's a really good point. And so it was a bit of a risk, but sometimes you just really have to believe in yourself and that risk and do what you think is good for you at that time.
Why did you decide communications?
That's a really, really good question. It was a field of study that I really enjoyed my undergrad years. I really liked my professors, and I really liked studying how people interact with each other. It's about how people interact interpersonally, how people interact in a business environment, how people might use messaging to persuade others or to, persuade them for good behaviors or to persuade them not to do something. For example, I worked in some health-related campaigns where sometimes we would persuade people to do healthy behaviors, but maybe also persuade them to stop doing other behaviors. And so really enjoyed that whole environment because there's a famous saying, and that is you cannot not communicate. And I wanted to study that and learn more.
Oh, that's interesting.
I love that one. That's great.
So I have a question for you, and this is kind of off the wall, but can you define what empowered means to you?
That's another great question. Empowered to me means feeling like you have the skill set. And what I mean by skill set, because I want to define that a little bit, I mean the the intrinsic motivation, the intrinsic fulfillment, as well as the ability to feel like you can go out and do something. Now, I truly believe everyone can feel empowered about something at some point in time. Maybe it's empowered to take control of their lives in a particular way. Maybe it's empowered to change some behaviors. Maybe it's empowered to go ahead and say, yes, I'm lonely. I want to meet friends, empowered to do something. And so do you feel at that moment the ability and know how to get started to do that next step? And again, truly believe anyone can have that for any particular thing. It's just about thinking about it and maybe putting a plan together and aligning your emotions around that as well.
I agree. And that's one reason why we're trying to do this podcast, right? I think everybody has the ability to be empowered, as you said. Most people don't think of some of the things that they're doing as empowering. And I want to make sure, we want to make sure that we're bringing to light to our listeners, especially young women who are just getting started or maybe want to change their career, to say you can do it.
Mm-hmm. And you can do it, and it can be defined how you want it to be. I mean, there are, different people out there struggling with different things or seeking opportunities or what have you, whether it's in the workplace or in a personal life, and people can muster it up to go ahead and do it.
So on that thinking, I'm going to ask you two questions and you can answer both or either of them. What do you think is the biggest challenge you've had to deal with in your career, personal life, as far as life? And have you experienced difficult people along the way in your workplace in particular?
So the challenging question is always an interesting one because some days seem like years, and then some years seem like days. And then as you move through time and you reflect, you kind of get a perspective on things. But yes, of course, I've had challenges. I'd say for me, I work at Michigan State and as an administrator, and I'd say over the last several years we have had some leadership changes, and that has been a challenge. Now the leadership team has navigated that, and I've navigated that to the best of my ability. But I will say, when you've had leadership changes with your own boss as well as president or the leader of the university, that can really be a challenge to say, okay, well, what's next for me? What do they want from me? How do they want me to interpret my job and move forward and so forth? So the state of change can be a challenge. It's also one that is navigable by kind of keeping a positive attitude and having reflection both with others and with yourself.
So you brought up something, and this is a question that one of our listeners have had. When your goals don't necessarily align with your manager's goals, how do you deal with that?
Yes, and that has happened from time to time, not only in this role, but even when I worked for a large food company selling pet food and several years ago. And so I'm going to go back to a time and place because I was really young when this interaction happened, and I was really proud of it. I would have been about 22, and my territory involved lots of large stores in the Indianapolis area, but it also involved some very, very small stores in the rural communities, some IGAs where they were very, very small, and their customer for buying dog food, for example, was a different customer than maybe an urban major city. And the company had just cut in this new product line that was all natural, no preservatives, all this came with a box that was very distinct. It was truly marketed at a certain pay level as well as type of animal owner. And my boss told me, well, you didn't do a good job cutting it in or breaking it into these IGA stores out in the rural, parts of Indiana. And I said to him, but overall, I met my sales goal. I was asked to do this. I've met this. And I did it by working in these other territories. I said, I cannot go and sell this product to this store owner for his customers when the data shows that their main purchasing is of this particular brand. It was of the regular dog food brand. And he looked at me. And keep in mind, he was 40 years my senior, and I was the only female in the entire field of 30 reps and the only one with a college education. He looked at me and he said, you are absolutely right. And I thought, "Phew, wow.
Wow.
I was lucky because that could have gone a whole bunch of different directions. I was very nervous.
Yep.
And I reflect on that all the time as I move through different things. And how I reflect on that is you have to have patience and you have to have perseverance. Data really helps. Clear thinking really, really helps. And I have had some interactions, even last week, where I have to present ideas that maybe weren't met with acceptance right away, and you have to go back to it. And I always tell myself, go back a couple of times, but know your limits and know that it's not worth pushing the boundaries so much if it gets you crossways with your boss or your colleagues, but it is okay to stand up for what you believe.
Well, I'm going to go back to the know your limits because as a marketing girl, as a creative person in the marketing field for 20 plus years, there were many times when somebody would come to me with a brief and say, here's what you need to create. And here's what you need to, this is what the client asked for. And I'd start getting the process, my copywriter, and we'd go down the path. And then we'd realize that it was completely wrong. And we would have to go back to the account exec team and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. And they'd have to go back to the client and say, hey, this didn't make sense. But knowing your limits when you had to push that envelope was a really important deal along the way. And so I can totally relate to what you're saying about that. And I think it's a really good piece of advice or an insight about it.
It's a really good insight. I've had the same issue, but in kind of a different way. A lot of times in corporate America, an edict will come down from above that says we need to do X, Y, Z. And you're like, fine, you want to support the goals and everything else. But sometimes when they're looking at a goal at the very top level, they don't necessarily know how it impacts everything else.
Right.
And we're in that situation today, right? I mean, corporate America, and we may edit this, I understand, but corporate America had an edict in a lot of places, reduce our costs. The way they did that was by moving things overseas. And that's gotten us into a bind today because they were looking at one area of the business and not necessarily another.
So great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great, Janet. So swing into a different topic because we are trying to cover quite a few things. Have you ever had to deal with any kind of, and we were talking about this before, but difficult people or any kind of harassment in your career? How would you deal with that if that was, you were giving this advice to our listeners as far as like how to deal with that idea of harassment?
Yes, I definitely have. I know when the Me Too movement first came out, my first thought was, who the heck hasn't, except with much more colorful language. And so, yes, I have. I mean, I think that I will say this. So I've been in the workplace for a little over 30 years now, and I have definitely, at multiple places, I have definitely noticed a change over the last few years in terms of harassment in general. But I most certainly have had to, navigate it. Early on in my career, I would navigate it by, I'd say, ignoring it and moving, along. But now there has been so much change, and from my perspective in the workplace, that the behaviors have greatly changed, in what companies tolerate and don't tolerate, I believe, has changed as well. I have seen differences. And so it's far less. Again, this is my perspective in my environment. And then, so I have not dealt with it recently, but over the years, yes, I have.
Okay, that's great though. I mean, it's great to hear that things are not like maybe they were a time when it was difficult for me. It changed my whole career path because I didn't want to do what I thought I wanted to do in college because I didn't want to face harassment for choosing a profession. So I chose a different profession that was a little more acceptable at that time for women. But I think that, I even saw the difference when I was in college starting to change in those 5 to 10 years where opportunities started to open up for people that wouldn't have been there before. And there was less harassment about moving in those directions. So,
and I think part of it is, because I've dealt with it as well, I think part of it is being comfortable standing up knowing when to stand up for yourself and knowing when to just let it slide.
Right.
I know I was in a situation once where it was a customer of ours, supplier of ours, and I was getting these emails from one of their employees, and I was just going to let it slide. And one of the men that I was working with found out about it, and he was the one that went out and backed me up and said, no, it's not right. And he took over without me doing anything, which was reassuring, right? I mean, there are other people out there that will help you navigate those situations. So thank you for that.
That's great.
So I know at Michigan State and some of the things that you've been involved with, you've had to deal with multiple both as students as well as some of the programs you've created. How do you deal with embracing some of the other cultures or helping, navigate through some of the differences? Do you have any suggestions on that?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Well, when you say culture, that is so widely defined. And you're right. Not only are we talking about maybe different backgrounds of people and individuals and stuff like that, but even departmental cultures, right? A department might have a culture. Yeah, so there might be different cultures between organizations or even within the organization. So I will talk about it in the most broad sense of the term. For me, it's perspective taking and understanding. So if it's an individual, it's understanding, what their background is and some of their experiences. It's also about listening. If it's navigating a workplace, within workplaces, and there's difference between cultures of units, processes of how to do things or how to conduct business or whatever. It's about listening and understanding and getting perspective on that. And then bringing that to the table when these groups have to come together. You can be, a conduit for that relationship to better unfold. And even across businesses within the same community, there could be differences of culture of how to do things and what does that mean? And what are the values and the mission that are driving these organizations? And so to me, the biggest part of the answer is listening and perspective taking to understand and look for commonalities, because there always will be commonalities, but also understanding that culture can exist in multiple layers and places.
So I think it's been some great insights. So I'm going to round back to the beginning and ask you, what would be your biggest life lesson that you would want to share with our listeners?
I appreciate getting some of these questions in advance. And I saw that life lesson one, and I'm like, that is probably the hardest one. It's a really, really good question, but it's also one I don't know. I might still have my biggest life lesson coming ahead of me. I just don't know what that is. That's not to say I haven't had a life lesson every day. But I did think about this quite a bit, looking for something. And to me, what I have learned as a life lesson is that it can be the smallest things or acts of kindness that can make the biggest difference in someone's life. And I've learned that from when I've maybe had a rough day and I'm out and about and I have an interaction with a cashier, right? I mean, something simple. And so this might not be the biggest life lesson that I have in 5 years, but where my head is right now, I think big life lesson is that sometimes the smallest things can make really big differences and in someone else's life, and to be intentional and kind is really important.
I like that.
I think that is a beautiful life lesson, and it applies to everything and everybody. So A for you. That's a great one. I know you said it was difficult, but I think that was perfect.
Oh, very good.
Do you have any other insights that you want to share with our listeners? Any last minute thoughts that you might want to share with them?
Well, first of all, I think this podcast is just really, really terrific, because I think it has the potential to reach so many different people and to show listeners that there are just a number of different perspectives and thoughts. And life is not linear, right? It's our path. It takes us in so many different directions. And a podcast like this, a series like this, shows them that they can really be open to all sorts of possibilities. So I guess that would be my parting thought of wisdom, if you wish.
That was great.
I love it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us. We're really grateful that you joined us today, Janet. And
thank you.
We are really looking forward to sharing this episode with our listeners. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
To our listeners, if you found this podcast helpful or have any questions, please let us know. You can send us an email at empoweredlifelessons@gmail.com, or you can visit our website at www.empoweredlifelessons.com. empoweredlifelessons.com, or you can find us on Facebook and other popular social media. And if you wish to share your life lessons with us, please contact us at our email, and we will put you up for consideration, because we are always looking for great insight, life lessons, and we really appreciate hearing from our listeners. In our next episode, meet Nella, a new mom and practicing vet. She is currently learning how to navigate her home and work life.